You're watching OffBeat Business TV or listening to the OBBM Network podcast. My name is Susan Hamilton, and today we are talking about some of the things that interest you, local business, or at least they should. We're coming to you out of DFW, our first recording in our brand new studios over here in Farmers Branch. And I've got Lynn Davenport with us today.
Hello. Thank you, Susan. This is awesome.
So this is going to be fun. Stay tuned.
Welcome to OffBeat Business TV and the OBBM Network podcast. CEO and host Susan Hamilton shares vital insight from local DFW leaders on successful life and business, focused squarely on local family business. It's time for our nation to rise, and we'll do it through a vibrant local business sector that stands up for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Ready to meet your advocates? Here's your host.
All right. The types of stuff we talk about all the time, Lynn, we are doing it on camera now. We are talking about what's going on behind the scenes. We've just had major local elections throughout DFW, and now we've got some runoffs. And by the time this comes out, that will be passed. And I wonder just what kind of turnout we can expect for those runoff elections.
Runoff elections are even worse than the primaries in the general. So it is difficult to get people to stay engaged through those few weeks leading up to the runoff. So in the city of Dallas, we have a lot of runoff elections, really critical runoff elections. So I'm hoping that people will stay with it and get out to vote.
I know that's something that you're pretty passionate about as a researcher. For those of you that don't know Lynn Davenport, most people do know her around here. She's been a researcher and an activist in the local business community, really protecting a lot of our community with the research that she's done. And we're proud to have you as a host on Social Impact Podcast on the OBBM Network. Thank you so much for that.
It's been really great to be able to share what I've learned over the years and have really interesting guests on the podcast. And so yes, I'm enjoying it.
Oh, from the time you hit the ground, you were sharing really important things with us. So before we kind of get into the topical nature of really this discussion, let's talk a little bit about some of the guests you've had, because if you haven't been following the Social Impact Podcast, you need to do that. That's some really fantastic stuff. From the very first show out the gate, you had Alice Linehan on. Mm-hmm. You two have been longtime friends and researching things that have been going on with ed tech for a very long time, and that's of course education technology.
Yes, and so Alice is how I really started to understand what was happening at the local level in my own district was happening in her district. And so she was putting all of this information out there, but she had been tracking bills from the federal and state level and how that impacted us at the local level, and put the pieces together for me, because I was seeing things coming in the classroom that I wasn't sure where was this coming from.
Like what, for instance?
Some of it was the education technology and how, so with No Child Left Behind, the federal legislation, that's how the stranglehold of the STAR test came into our schools. And so you would see, I saw a real shift. I guess mid-elementary school with my oldest, who's 21 today. But when when all my kids were in elementary school, we started seeing changes in how they were educating the kids, because it was all centered around the test. So it became more of these drill and kill, test and punish campuses. And it didn't, you're like, where is this coming from? And so then you go back to the bill and you realize that trickles down into the schools. And then the teachers, their performance, they're trying to tie it to the test scores. So it's really a perversion of education, and people talk about how they're seeing a dumbing down of our kids. Right. Well, I can tie it back to when you reduce everything to data points and test scores, then you narrow the curriculum. So then you're only teaching what is on the test.
It's interesting that one of the reasons that resonates with me is that's actually what we do in marketing as well. Mm-hmm. And it's really the wrong angle, because what it's doing is putting a whole lot of data that other people can contrive their way, and it takes away a local voice.
Right.
And so what do you do? Because you're not going to take technology back. I mean, it's out the gate. It's there. And there's a lot of good things about technology with education. So it's not like everything about technology is dangerous.
It's that it's replacing the teacher and that relationship. It's also standing, you put that technology between the parent and the child too. And so there's really no firewall. So the school boards, the teachers, the parents, they're not necessarily engaging with that student like the technology is. And so...
Oh, that's an interesting point.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it now, you can access that 24/7. And so I would be hypocritical to say that if I'm against technology. I'm not against technology. Right. It's just I believe that we still need paper, pencil, books, and the foundational knowledge that really the slow and steady and the time-tested strategies are the best.
Wait a minute, what about advancement?
But that's how did all these geniuses learn?
Now, I think that's a very good point.
And all these scientists, the best STEM workers have a very well-rounded education. They're actually very creative. But if you pigeonhole a child into this whole technical space and you try to bring in workforce and career into elementary school, but you're putting the cart before the horse. And so you're actually not going to get a very good STEM worker because they've been starved of the most basic things like math and language and the things that build the critical thinking. Critical thinking has, you hear about it all the time. Oh, kids don't know critical thinking. Well, that's not a lesson.
I hear that all the time.
That's not like a specific lesson plan. That's something that evolves over time.
That's the truth. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the truth. Critical thinking means I know how to come to a conclusion. I've been exposed to the ways of thinking that I can come to the hypothesis. I can test my hypothesis, and I can know then whether or not this is something I can trust. And if it's all about the outcome, that changes everything. That means everything's the variable as long as we get to an outcome. And unfortunately, what I've learned is that's the data that's being traded on right now.
Well, that's on purpose. Put everybody on a dashboard, teachers and students. And outcomes, that should never be the focus. Really, it's about quality inputs. And what are we putting into our children? How are they learning? What are they learning? Who's profiting off the learning? So when you look at that, you can see the ed tech really is a lucrative model that is a business model, and it's not in the best interest of the children.
Well, it's interesting that a lot of what is going on is not in the best interest of the children. One of those things a lot of people think is forward thinking to take cursive writing out of the classroom. Mm-hmm. The problem I have with that is you're pretty much ensuring the next generation can't even read the Constitution of the United States.
Correct. And even, I'll take it a step further, is that we know that cursive writing is great for the brain, and for kids who have dyslexia, it's very good for children with dyslexia. Well, connecting those brain
connections.
Yeah, right.
Making those connections.
Dendrites, I was trying to think of the word. Yeah, but it's good for the brain.
I noticed I was paying attention to some of the feeds when it had to do with our local politics and understanding that some of the discussion going on with dyslexia and some of the different learning challenges that are being seen right now, and the voice of the parents discussing, hey, wait a minute, you're wanting to do this with what money when I've been begging you for help with my child for years now and you have not responded and my child needs this kind of help. That is where I really feel the information that you're sharing with us is so relevant to the local business community, because we are the family business and that matters to us. We've got every reason to want that school to do well.
Yes.
Chances are we have a home office even after we've moved out, because that's a great tax strategy. It also keeps us involved with the school. We thought we would be supporting that teacher. We thought we'd be supporting that police officer, even with our tax dollars and just with our visibility. We got a home office. I'm here. We're part of the community. We're probably going to be funding the games, the booster clubs. And
yeah, investing in the neighborhood schools is really important to me, and I've been doing that for the last, I don't know how many years. I mean, I've had kids in school since, so my first was born in 2000, so I've been engaged at the local level, and through PTA and fundraisers and all of those things. But the neighborhood school is really under attack, and that's something that people don't fully understand. But when they talk about all of these school choice options, not talking about the vouchers, but really when you're talking about charters and alternatives to the public school, it's easy to want to take some of those options and run with them, because the neighborhood school really has been it's been dumbed down. And like I said, through the legislation, all of those things. So then it makes the school look like a bad option, because people want their kids to be educated, not indoctrinated.
Well, and that's interesting, because if we don't have the support for that, the thing about the public school that Alice Linehan was bringing to the table was, hey, that's where you've got representation to the board. You can go to the board. If you've got an issue with the way things are going, you've got a voice. And in the absence of that, you really don't have a voice. All those charter schools and the private schools.
Because charters don't have elected boards, and so it's taxation without representation. So it's not a good choice. But I would argue that our school boards are rubber stampers, so they're not necessarily representing us. So I've been fighting,
the way I feel.
Both sides of this. It's a tough spot to be in, because there's not.
Well, we can't fix it. We're not going to fix it with one conversation. We're not going to fix it with one flashlight on an area.
But there's more parents than there are of the administration. There's more of us than there are of the school board. I mean, really, we do have the power. It's just we've got to galvanize, and we've got to get educated and know exactly what is going on, so that we can advocate for our kids and get rid of some of these things that are creeping into our schools. And because we've talked about this before, but it's in our Texas Constitution to make free public education, make provision for free public education. And so for a long time I fought to preserve that and to clean it up, not kill it. At this point, I don't know that we can even really clean it up or save it. So then the best thing to do is for parents to advocate on behalf of their children, and to pay attention to what's happening to their children. If anything good has come from this pandemic, which I would say mostly not, it's been devastating to children and to businesses and our communities. But the good thing is the parents have their kids at home, and they're working at home, and they're seeing what their kids are doing on these Zoom lessons, and they're waking up. And there was a mother of 6 in Richardson ISD. She went before the board and she said, I finally saw that my kids who were making straight A's, they didn't know how to read. They're not being educated in this district. She pulled them out.
Yeah, those are the types of things that I have heard, because I know that in our community, Richland College was, when my kids were graduating high school, they were saying, these kids are coming out of high school and they're not college level ready.
Yeah, and they're being remediated.
And what's happened is they spend so much time doing that by the time they get to their actual college level courses, they're pretty burned out and they're not finishing. So then you've got this space where these teachers are going, well, we're not really completing what they're coming to school for. So what's the game being played? And that's when I started paying attention. It's like there's something going on here that doesn't smell right, and I don't understand what that is. What is it? And participation is the name of the game. You were mentioning that some of these things that you've gone to, I mean, unless it's some big
like a controversial
issue or something a little more glamorous, you're not really hearing about it, and people aren't participating. And these meetings are open, and people can go and support them and pay attention. It's not easy, but some people are doing it. And the problem is a lot of the people that do not have the best interests of, and if they're not hearing you, they're already missing out. And I would say that's marketing. One of the things I've been teaching people about is that difference between content and copy. What is that, right? So the difference is how it looks, isn't necessarily how it is. And the content's really the backup of what it is. And so really digging deep in that, we're a part of it. We've got to look and when we've got questions, not be afraid to ask those questions. And unfortunately, where we're kind of headed the idea of asking questions has become socially unacceptable. And if it's that way for grown adults, how much more difficult is that going to be for the youth growing up in the school system
that
very
we're
true.
Ignoring? They're really using social media big time to push things like the vaccine on kids and a lot of peer pressure to wear masks, and it's heavy, and so the kids are really they're feeling that heat from, and I think that's intentional.
I do
it's propaganda.
Too. So when we listen, let's hang on to that thought. We're going to take a break and hear from a few of our sponsors, and when we come back, you're going to hear more from my conversation with Lynn Davenport.
What does it mean to devote your life to the truth? Does it mean investigating communist subversion here in America? Does it mean exposing the deadly fentanyl crisis in the Midwest? Or spending late nights and covering deep government corruption? Does it mean persevering over 20 years, even after 4 masked men set one of our printing presses on fire last year? Because at a time when America's traditional values are under attack, it's the responsibility of righteous journalists to uphold truth and tradition.
Business runs on technology, and human beings are creatures of habit. Unfortunately, not all our habits are good. Technology, when it works, is supposed to make our lives easier, creating routines that allow us to protect customer data, track our progress, forecast the future, communicate better, and move much faster. So, you need technology solutions that work when you're not working, or simply not paying attention. Smart technology solutions, making the complicated uncomplicated.
My American dream is to help you stay healthy and energized so you can live your American dream.
Our American dream is equipping future generations of American dreamers.
My American dream is to protect my community so they can live their American dream.
My American dream is to bring you some spice and flavor to your life.
Our American dream is ensuring what's most valuable to you.
Our American dream is creating opportunities for healthcare providers so they can have their American dreams.
My American dream is serving our business community and advocating for all of your American dreams.
And we're back. You're watching OffBeat Business TV or listening to the OBBM Network podcast, listening to the OBBM radio. My name is Susan Hamilton, and I'm talking with Lynn Davenport, who is an established researcher here in North Texas. I don't think you're limited here, though, because I've seen you running all over the nation over this last year. You want to make sure we're aware of some of the things going on behind the scenes that don't always make the marketing headlines. And that's important, and especially for me, it's important to bring it to the local business community so that they can start going, hey, wait a minute, I should ask more questions, and I should not be stifled from asking those questions, because that's the only way we're really going to uncover the truth. In my opinion, when everything sounds the same, that's propaganda, and I don't trust it automatically. And I know from the countless conversations that I have here at the OBBM Network all week long that I'm not alone in that. And so what do we do then to become more aware, Lynn? I appreciate your podcast, the Social Impact Podcast on the OBBM Network. It's bringing in these experts to help us uncover these things.
Yeah, I think, regarding the propaganda, have you seen the video clip where they mashed up all of these news stations, and they were always, they all said the same thing, and it was
the Mockingbird.
Something about our democracy, and our democracy, and our democracy, and they were all saying the exact same thing. It's an attack on our democracy, or something like that. And they put, 100 stations together and played them over, back to back, and so you realize they were all given the same script to read verbatim. That's not news. That's propaganda.
Right.
And so we have to become the media. So you literally are the media.
And you are too. Susan can't do it, right? It takes this community. It's one of the reasons that we do what we do at the OBBM network, to really give voice to the local business community so we can encourage each other. You know, not, as you and I both know, not everybody's a host, not everybody's a guest. Some people are advertisers. Everyone needs more exposure. In the business community, we've got skin in the game on absolutely every issue that's going on in the news today. So where is our voice? And if we stifle that, which I believe was an intentional situation last year, how on earth what does America look like? In the absence of local business, do we continue to exist?
Oh, the suppression of free speech, and I'm being censored at every turn, and things that aren't even controversial. So Twitter has censored things, Facebook has censored things. Facebook's probably the worst. And LinkedIn is still pretty good about they're not really on my radar. Well, or I'm not on their radar.
But that hasn't stopped the messaging of just making sure we're aware of, hey, this is the language and this is what this phrase means.
Yes.
And that's what I'm really appreciating you bringing out. Let's talk to experts. The other thing that concerns me is when we pick a handful of people and say these are the authorities in absolutely everything you're allowed to know. That tells me, wait a minute, there might be more. There's be more doctors.
Way more.
There may be more marketers. There
Trust
may be
science,
more platforms.
Susan, the science. There's only one science.
There's the science, right?
Only one scientist we can trust.
As far as I understand, science is constantly growing and learning.
No, it's fixed. It's settled. It's settled.
You know, if we're going to take a greater stand, what I really appreciate you unveiling with what's going on with our kids and the school boards. It was interesting to know that the DISD had the equipment and the technology in 2017 from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to deal with the coronavirus. So a lot of people don't realize that actually there was a lot of knowledge about that before it ever went into place.
Right, it was somewhat premeditated. Well, so we know that Bill Gates is tied to Event 201, which was basically a trial run, kind of a test run, talking about this, potential pandemic.
And the World Economic Forum is circulating that video right now, where those things are actually documented on it.
That's right.
But you have to slow down frame by frame because it speeds all the way through in this 1 minute video. But it's clearly there.
Yes, and so we know that he was predicting a pandemic that he has benefited from. Bill Gates I'm talking about. And so, but in 2019, he invested $650 million in Crown Castle, and that's who Dallas ISD and Richardson ISD both use for our Wi-Fi hotspots. So one could draw the conclusion.
Interesting.
And the deduction, you can deduct that he knew that this was coming and that we would be sheltered at home, our kids would have their devices at home and need Wi-Fi access.
So it's interesting then what happens with the technology, because now that pulls right into the social emotional learning and what you have been sharing, that we have come away from academics, away from I'm going to teach you how to think, and instead teach you what to think. And we're going to give you badges and awards digitally, digital high fives for agreeing with a way to feel and a way to be versus what is correct. What is 1 + 1 2? Right. Well, now there seems to be some debate across the nation over what is math.
Math is now being charged as racist, and so that's a whole
It's an interesting,
topic.
And so these are not these are not things that we should ignore.
No.
There are things that we should be talking about openly and going, okay, is that in fact the case? Because if it is the case, we need to change it. If it's not the case, then we need to stand against an ideology that would really change the framework of kids' education coming up. I mean, you've got brand new ones. My grandson, as a Head Start student last year at 4, here he's 4 and 5 years old, he spent the entire year in a mask at school. And I'm hearing students say, I don't know what, my teacher doesn't know what I look like. They don't, and they want to please at that age, these young kids. They want so much to have that attention and approval from adults, and they're not seeing smiles.
And they learn from the smiles, the those cues.
So what's this going to mean for next year? So I understand that this has now been banned from happening again, but what on earth is next year going to, and I wonder, the parents are going to have some things. We're concerned about education. We're busy running our business. Our kids need to be in good hands while we're doing that, and they need to be continuing to learn. So what are some of the things that we might be able to do to make better choices to protect our communities?
Well, I think showing up to the board meeting, I think it takes time, but most school districts have 2 a month. So you could go to the main meeting and then they have a board study session 2 weeks later. It doesn't take that much time. Most school districts record their meetings, although Highland Park, I went to a board meeting last night there because there was an outcry from the community about critical race theory and social emotional learning and some of the ed tech apps like Brain Pop that were coming into the schools, and they weren't being vetted. And so I showed up there just to listen and to speak, but they don't record their meetings, which I thought was interesting. And so, but most do. By law, if there are a certain number of students in the district, they have to record the meetings, and so those are public. So
there should be archives that you can go back in and listen to what those discussions are and the going back and forth. I think that's important when we're looking at accountability.
When you were talking about content, so when I go and I speak before a commission or the city council or school board, I'm not necessarily doing it for those on the horseshoe because a lot of times they're on their phone, they're not really listening, or if I go to the legislature, half the time they're in and out, they're not really listening. I go there because I'm in an official capacity in an official meeting, a public meeting. I splice out that 3 minutes and I share that with my audience on the followers on Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn, and I use it. So content, I think, is important, and we're either creating or we're consuming, and so I would prefer to be on the creating side and being that's a way to use social media for good and use it for your voice. And then there are ways of using hashtags, and sometimes I use their words, which is the whole reason behind the social impact. They're using these good words for nefarious purposes or predatory ways, in predatory ways.
And if you haven't been listening to the Social Impact podcast, I will just make a note there. She's talking about the social impact bonds and how you need to understand that that's the type of marketing that sounds real good, but if you don't understand how that money, the private-public partnerships are going on in your very own community to get things done and really strong arm a lot of messaging and a lot of activity, you'd be very, very surprised. And you can know this. It's knowable. It's not hidden. You just have to look.
Right, because they don't necessarily say we are putting out a social impact bond. They will give it some sort of euphemism or a human-sounding, soft, warm and fuzzy name, and even like the bill "No Child Left Behind." I mean, who wants a child to be left behind?
True.
How could that be bad? Or Race to the Top, or Every Student Succeeds Act.
Lynn, it's always fun talking with you. We are going to take a break and hear from a few of our sponsors. And when we come back, we're going to dive into just a little bit more. I hope you're enjoying this conversation as much as I am. You're watching Offbeat Business TV or listening to the OBBM Network. We'll be right back.
The OBBM Network acknowledges that this is a pivotal time in history, and it is clear the United States of America has been undermined by many of our elected officials for some time now. We want our local business audience to stand strong in the face of what we now understand, and to be empowered to grow our businesses on the local level beyond the limitations that have been imposed upon us. We believe it is in our national interest to inspire our communities through strong economic development, and additionally to hold our elected officials accountable for accurate representation of we the people. For that reason, we encourage you to go to WeStandForFreedom.com to learn about the National Write Your Congressman organization that has been the trusted communication tool for local communities for over 60 years. Learn how your representatives are voting. Understand the laws and regulations under consideration on the state and federal level before they are enacted at the county and city levels. Communicate directly with these officials and stand up for yourself, for by doing so, you will protect the communities you serve preserve from tyrannical rule and unconstitutional reforms. The OBBM Network is the premier voice for local business, and we take that responsibility seriously. The OBBM Network has everything you need to grow and transition your business for success on popular syndicated podcast networks, Roku and other video channels, and the OBBM Network app. We work for you, local business, and we've got your back.
And we're back. You're watching Offbeat Business TV. You're listening to the OBBM Network. And if you are in studio or online, you're listening to the OBBM radio right now. This is Susan Hamilton. I'm talking with Lynn Davenport. And we're talking about ed tech and some of the things going on in our local community here in the Dallas area. Typically, we're talking about DFW. I don't know that you're doing any active research or representation in Fort Worth area.
No, but I do follow what they're doing with Dallas ISD, and they're trying to go against the critical race. There's a bill trying to stop critical race theory, and so Fort Worth ISD's Superintendent Scribner and Dallas ISD's Superintendent Hinojosa, they wrote a letter declaring their opposition to this bill. But no, I haven't paid that much attention to Fort Worth.
You know what, Lynn, it can be frustrating. We heard a little bit from our studio audience in between about, you know, what can we do? There's a frustration out there that this thing we've ignored it for so long, and this great big monster, and what on earth can we do now? And one of the things that the OBBM Network is all about, as you know, is making sure we educate the smartest hubs. We have to be very strategic because things have come through our communities like a freight train over the last 18 months. Mm-hmm. And the very important thing to do is go after people who are starting to realize, hey, getting close. Oh my goodness. We need to put the brakes on here and activate people who believe they can make a difference in it, and the rest are just going to have to follow. Mm-hmm. We don't have time really to the education out there. You can get educated, number one. You can get connected to the people who are making a difference, and you can participate. But as far as that, can we make an impact, Lynn?
Well, we got a question from the audience here, and it's like, what do you do if you know that it's so far gone that there's not really anything you can do to turn your school around or save your kid from what's happening in the school? You pull them out, starve the beast, and you can figure it out. I think parents they're intimidated by the whole education process because it's daunting. But I think that our bar is so high that we want our kids to be geniuses. We want them to be, athletic, just gifted athletes, and we've got and a musician and an artist. I mean, we have so much pressure on these kids.
But they can be, and I've seen some people that do that and do it remarkably well. And as a matter of fact, when they do, they're staying out of trouble. There's something to that.
Well, now, if you can afford it, you can pull them out, and you can there are all kinds of options out there, whether it's private school or homeschool or these co-ops, and you have kind of a hybrid model. I don't recommend the homeschooling where they're at home and they're just on a device with some national K-12 program. I don't think that's the answer. I think that there are issues with isolation and way too much screen time.
Homeschool is smarter these days. I noticed they work in groups.
Not like people thought.
Yeah, it's not. And I had some experience with that as a teenager. So it is very different today, and I've seen it very successsul.
It's not like they're socially awkward and isolated and just with a bunch of strange people. That's the perception of homeschool, is that you've got this insular group. But no, it's not like that. And also people don't realize, in an 8-hour school day, they're not learning that whole time. There's a lot of transition. There's a lot of extra stuff they cram in there that's needless. So if you really look at how much time is spent for a homeschool parent, it could be maybe an hour or two a day, and then you're doing other things.
Well, it takes a while to absorb and track what the kids are doing so that you can continue to teach them. Mm-hmm. There's that. But when we're talking about the expense associated with that, we're not talking about the education expense. There is some expense to it.
Sure.
But we're also talking about the fact that you can't work and do that. The odds of you being able to hold down a job and give to, because teaching is a full-time job, and nothing that we're saying is taking away from the dedication of the wonderful teachers that are doing such a great job in our school. We're talking really more about how to make sure that we're still instilling the family, our community values that bring us together as a nation, bring us together as a family, that don't divide. And some of these things that can sound, with the marketing language, really sound great, as we talked about before, can really be insidious and divisive in those areas, and raise a child to really not understand who they are. That's not the purpose of the school. The purpose of the school is to know how to learn.
Well, what I think you're talking about is there's this movement, it's called about the whole child. And so the school now views itself as responsible for the whole child. And sometimes that is a wedge between the parents and the student.
Yes.
And they think that they really own that child.
Well, and there's a lot of, that to me is what I find is the problem, and that I think we need to be showing up at the school boards about, because when it starts to turn a child from talking to their parents and preferring, they're already going to do that, folks. Your kids are going to do that.
At certain ages,
you don't want
they're going to start separating.
Right. If you've got the endorsement of the school, the very school that you are participating in, your kids are going to that now you matter less, that your point of view doesn't matter, that you're not allowed to express that point of view to your own child or raise your own child with family values, community-driven values, Christian principles for that matter, that those things can be really shut down. I think that's where we have to start making a stand now. And yeah, you can pull them out, but that doesn't stop what's going on in the community in our absence, because then we didn't participate. And there's a whole lot of kids that really need to see their own education. They need to know how to learn. They need the reading, writing, arithmetic, right?
Yeah, and I think that now we have so many tools that we can figure out what's best for that child. If a parent really, if they want to, there's nothing that's going to stop them from advocating and educating their own child.
Well, I suggest we do it. We need to show up and show up strong and start making it to these meetings and make our voice heard. There's a handful of things out there that show that parents are starting to rise up and go to these school board meetings and tell them how they feel about this and that. And it's starting to make a difference. So I would just really encourage people to do that and to participate in it. And Lynn, how can people reach you if they'd like to know more about the research that you're doing and maybe come alongside of you and support some of these initiatives, because you're very well versed in them?
Yeah, so I'm on Facebook, Lynn Strawn Davenport. I run my old campaign page, which is Lynn Davenport for Richardson ISD taxpayers, and then I'm on LinkedIn under Lynn Davenport. I run another page called EduCray, EDUCRAY, on Facebook. So private messaging through there or through the OBBM network. I'm on there. Do you want me to give my phone?
It's already goes out with all of your podcasts, so you're fine to do that.
Yeah, and Twitter, Lynn S. Davenport on Twitter. I'm an aggressive tweeter.
Well, there you have it. If you want information, you can get more. But I hope that you've left this episode a little more excited about your ability to participate, a little more educated about, hey, should I go, should I not? Yeah, you gotta go. And find a way to, one of the things about the OBBM network, folks, is we want you to get smart business information that helps you move quickly and make more money, because your profitability is now so much more important. You're gonna have to be able to step away from your business long enough to participate, am I right? That's not free. We all know time is money. So until next time, find us on the OBBM network on Spotify, Apple, iHeart, wherever you enjoy podcasts, and all of our YouTubes and the link location associated with this video. Until next time, you've been watching Offbeat Business TV or listening to the OBBM network.